Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. As everybody's now entered into the room, I'll be supporting the conversation in the background. Thanks for taking the time to join us. This will be the first of some sessions regarding the safety management system and you. I want to introduce two of my team members that are going to walk us through this conversation. Robert or Bob Sinsens with us, depending on your camera, to the right or to the left. And of course, Ed Ratzlaff with Aerofoil. He's going to walk us through the conversation. But my job today is to welcome you, encourage you to go into the chat, write some questions there. I think Ed is going to take the questions at the end, and Bob will help facilitate that. So you can either write them in the chat or save them with your mic on following. But what I'm going to do is perhaps turn this over to Bob to walk us through the conversation, and over to you, Bob.
Okay, thank you, Anthony, and welcome all to this first session. And we hope we're going to give you information that'll be obviously of use and of interest, and the first of several, as Anthony mentioned. So from a presentation perspective, I just want to walk through today what we're going to be doing. So Ed, I'm not sure if you're putting the slides on, but we have two particular points we'll be talking to on our agenda and this presentation. The first is understanding your SMS annual review, and the second is understanding your risk profile. Finally, we'll have a Q&A session. As mentioned by Anthony, we'll hopefully like to hold those till the end. And then as either through the chat, whatever. I did have a fourth item I wanted to mention before I kick it over to Ed, is that this is an opportunity for the association and for you to start looking at issues more proactively. Many times we deal with matters that are reactive in nature, and we would like to be able to, where we can, be proactive. That permits us to create sessions like this and to address issues that might be of interest to all other members. So a question by one may be of use by others. So I think that we'll stop there, and I'll kick it over to Ed.
Thank you for the introduction, Bob and Anthony. As Bob already mentioned, we're going to look at, I just need to move this out of the way. It's covering my notes. Move that right over here. So we want to start by understanding what the annual SMS review is. Where does it fit in with the overall QA program, and what is its purpose? The same idea with the risk profile. We want to understand what it is and how it relates to the overall QA program. And as we are trying, so we already talked about that, we'll dive right in. If there are individual questions, I believe Bob is monitoring that. I'm happy to answer them in between if it relates specifically to the content here. And other more broad questions, we can cover those at the end in the Q&A. So let's dive right in. Before I go any further, I need to stress that most people make safety far more complicated than it needs to be. Simply put, a safe operation is one that makes sure that all the right things are done and that they are done right. Safety is not supposed to be like the Buckley's commercial. Safety does not have to taste awful for it to work. And today we want to review some of the technical requirements, which can look a little bit more complicated, but I want to see if I can convince you that it's not as bad as it might seem and has often made out to be. So with that, what is the annual SMS review? As can be seen by the name itself, this is a review that takes place on an annual basis or once every 12 months. The purpose is to look specifically at the overall SMS system to ensure that it continues to meet all the requirements to ensure regulatory compliance, but more importantly, the safety of flight. This means making sure that the systems are appropriate for the size and complexity of the operation and that they continue to be relevant. In addition, this time can also be used to look at new and emerging hazards to safety of flight. Usually, this is not the time and place where detailed reports and incidents are discussed. It is important to understand that the SMS review is not the same as the QA audit. Of course, this is no reason why this review can't be done at the same time as the audit, but if that is done, then it should be recorded separately and in a way that makes it clear that the specific annual SMS review has been completed in addition to or alongside the audit. Technically, the annual SMS review is more high level than the QA audit. But of course, that does not mean you can't go deeper if that is what you think is necessary. What is the regulatory basis for the annual SMS review? It is part of CAR 604 and Division 12, and it has its own subsection 207, and that goes alongside with the QA program and other higher level items. And in a moment there, I will show a screenshot where it looks on a table of contents, just so it's easier to picture how that all works together. In addition to the annual requirement, operators are also required to submit the SMS review anytime an accident or incident that affects aviation safety has occurred. Now, I have not yet seen a definition how exactly, what kind of an accident, because obviously not every little accidents is different, but every little incident will trigger that and qualify that. So there is some discretion, but anytime aviation safety appears to be jeopardized, you should be conducting the annual SMS review. It is important to note that the annual SMS review may not be extended beyond the 12-month interval. As some of you, or maybe all of you, know, the annual QA audit can be extended beyond the 12-month interval, but that does not apply to the annual SMS review. That is important to make that distinction. So in addition to some of the more high-level items, such as scope and size and whether all areas are covered, a good SMS review will look for trends and effectiveness of the various aviation components. In general, we're making sure that everything works and that everything is functioning properly and that there are actual results happening. It's a little bit trite, but we don't want to be trying to be safe. We actually need to be safe. We want to accomplish something. We want to succeed at it. In some instances, I have seen operators where the same one year after another, the same issues keep happening, and that's what we want to avoid. So we're looking for effectiveness. And that goes for root causes, our corrective actions, quality control, QA program, all those things. So now we're looking at that table of contents. This is a screenshot from Cars Deluxe. And here you can see where the, I don't know, can you see my mouse there? Anybody can give feedback?
Yeah, we do, Ed. Yep.
Yeah, okay, good. I will also highlight that here. So that is where Division 12, the safety management system. And so underneath that, you have specifically 207, that is the review of the safety management system, and it's right underneath the QA program. So that is all part of it. And just in case you're wondering, 208, that is actually the way it shows up in Cars Deluxe. There is no specific line in this table of contents, but those are the duties of the private operator. One thing that some of you may be aware of, these 604 rules specific to the safety management system, they are currently subject to an NPA, which when everything is said and done, it will see all of these rules move to CAR Part 1. And both Bob and I, we have reviewed the proposed changes, and it does not look like this will in any substantive way, material way, affect the regulations the way we're currently used to doing it. So other than changing the car references, its compliance should be okay. Sample SMS review questions. So one of the things I'd like to do is just give you a few samples, 6. When I audit, I have a list of, I think it's around 20 to 25 questions that I can use. These are 6 sample questions that I would ask that would come up during an annual SMS review. And so here we go. So this first question relates to the ops manager's duty to share information with any person with whom the operator exchanges services. Again, some of you might be aware that there is upcoming or contemplated regulation NPAs that are being discussed that look at how do we form a database, how does Canada form a database where safety information can be shared that goes beyond what this particular requirement is. But the idea of a safety environment requires that people talk to each other and exchange information as it relates to hazards, incidents, best practices, and all that kind of stuff. Of course, those of you who participate in the CBAA RMS, you are already doing that. The next question relates to the requirement to identify hazard and risks and to monitor and profile them. So there we're simply looking at does the operator have a system to review for trends, those kind of things. NAD, KDORs, that's specifically what I'm looking for. NAD refers to the CBAA RMS portion, the National Aggregate Database, where we're sharing that information. The third question is a sample of an emerging threat. It's not that new, really, the GNS outage, because GNSS has been around for a long time. But some of the decommissioning of traditional nav aids is still in the works. And so it's still an ongoing issue. And most of the operators I talk to, they're quite aware of it, and they have complete redundancy. It's built into the system. Maybe something that is more relevant nowadays would be something like GPS spoofing or spamming, or even ATC spoofing or spamming, which is one of the most recent issues, especially in the North Atlantic and some parts of the Eastern world. The fourth question relates specifically to the requirement to communicate with personnel and review reports, safety critical information at appropriate intervals. This is more company internal, so that is where you're looking at. So how well are we doing at sharing information with our employees, best practices, tips and tricks, all that kind of good stuff. The fifth question is about ensuring that the audit checklists cover each area that is being audited in sufficient detail. Another angle on this would be to ask if the questions being asked are the right kind of questions. So as you can see, we're really sitting back and looking at how is everything we're doing helping us be safer. That's really what this is about. And then you look at specific areas and tools like audit checklists and so forth that would help with that. The last question, the sixth question, is a high-level catch-all type kind of question that allows an auditor to comment on just about anything related to the SMS system. For those of you who do audits, you will know that there's no way you can have a checklist that covers every last little detail. It would become unmanageable. And so what it is good to have in every checklist is good to have these high-level questions where you can then put just about anything else you observe, and if necessary, point that out, make it an observation, a finding, or whatever else needs to be. So next up, we will look at a KDOR trend report just as a sample. So this would be one of the things that you might want to look at as part of your annual SMS review. You would look at trend reports from a variety of sources. And the trend report that I have here was provided to us courtesy of Transport Canada. And this is based on reports for the specific to the Ontario region for the last 10 years. These 10 different items, the 10 types of events, navigation error, bird strike, landing gear, these are the same nationally, but the data here reflects only Ontario within the last 5 years. As you can see on this report, navigation errors is the big thing. And so when you're looking at this in your operation, you will want to look at, okay, navigation error seems overall to be the biggest concern. So how does that reflect our operation? Do we have a history of navigation errors? Are navigation errors included in these 53 possibly? If you can confidently say that you haven't had any navigation errors and nobody is aware of navigation errors, then it's probably safe to assume that whatever it is you're doing helps prevent these things. And so keep doing what you're doing. If on the other hand, that you see that your flight plan activation, that those 5 are probably all yours, then that might be an area where you want to look at things. So let's keep going. Maybe I'll just check in. I have one more example of trends, hazard and trends, and then maybe after that, if there's anything in terms of questions, if there's anything that came up. If not, then we'll move on.
So far, no, other than someone asking for the deck after the fact that Anthony's addressed. So let's just keep going.
Yeah, okay, no, that sounds good. CBAA Hazard and Trends Report. This is a report that the CBAA produces and is intended for use by CBAA RMS subscribers. The RMS, as you probably know, is free for anyone who is a CBAA member. And so that is produced typically once a year. Sometimes we have produced them more often, but typically it's once per year. The data comes from the CBAA NAD. NAD, again, is the National Aggregate Database that goes together with the CBAA RMS. We use information from NAV Canada. NAV Canada puts together annually a report for a 12-month period that compiles all the aviation occurrence reports. So that's basically CADORs, and trends them out for us, gives us an overview over where things are at, and that list is curated specifically to business aviation type kind of aircraft. And this one was for the period from August through July, from August 22 to July 2023. We also look at the aviation safety letter. That was this one, and did the TSB watch list. In the past, we've also sometimes looked at NBAA information. When the time comes to prepare these reports, we'll look at what's available and come up with something that will hopefully be beneficial to and useful for CBAA members. On the second page of this particular report, we see this table, and the value of this table is, the values in this table are the raw number of occurrences for each period and occurrence type. This data does not represent a rate of AORs for a fixed number of movements, and so it is not really possible to establish a trend from one period to the next. What we have done here, they are ranked in the most recent year from highest to lowest. So you can see number 1 is 484 incidents in 2022-23 period, number 2, and then it goes down from there. What we mean by baseline is simply the implication is that we can't, very difficult to draw an accurate comparison based on the change, because in a report like this one, if the activity, the flight movements, if they significantly pick up, even if there is no change in the rate, the number of incidents will also change, and that makes it a little bit harder than to work with it. What we've done here, though, is we have compared the pre-COVID and the post-COVID, pre-COVID being 2018-19 and post-COVID 2022-23 periods, because from data in other sources, we know that the overall movements are very similar between those 2 years. And what we're looking at is the change between those 2 years. That's what that other column there represents. And you can see here aircraft equipment issues for more or less the same number of movements has increased by 142 or 41.5%. That's a fairly significant increase, and it's something that as an operator you want to be aware of, and you want to be looking at how does this reflect our operation? Is there something similar happening in our operation? If you have little or no equipment issues, then you're doing better than average. If you have a number of issues, you might be able to go back and see then, yeah, wait a minute, maybe for some reason we contributed to this increase. Maybe it's no individual operator The idea with these reports is, with this kind of data, is that you look at it and you mull over it and you look at what can we learn from it? What can we do to contribute to reducing these numbers, but more importantly, to make sure that we're not part of these numbers, because you don't want to be part of these numbers. These are incidents, and more often than not, we don't want those incidents to happen. There are some exceptions, like, for example, go-arounds. They will factor in here. In my experience, most go-arounds are the response to another incident. That's the issue. The go-around is the proper response to something else. And so a go-around by itself is obviously not an issue. Let's see here. How are we doing? Coming up on time here. Better hustle. So next, we will look at the risk profile real quick. The regulatory for the basis for the risk profile, as you can see just by the car number there, it's much more granular, it's much more specific. It is a requirement that is buried deep inside the cars, and it is a specific requirement for operators using a train to proficiency program under the existing exemption and the related advisory circular. A risk profile, simply put, is a description of any set of risks related to the organization's operating environment. So it's operating environment specific, and its capacity to deal with significant high-level risks. So we're not looking at every little thing, we're looking at high-level things. And it's linked to the achievement of objectives. This definition is from a document called Risk Management Essentials that was published by the Canada School of Public Service. I found it quite helpful because that's actually what it is. The one thing that I've noticed in aviation is, because it's a very regulated industry and because everything follows standard operating procedures, many of the standard risks that would be part of a risk profile in a less regulated industry, they are really already encapsulated, they are enshrined in different regulations, SOPs, training programs, rules, all that kind of stuff. So that makes it sometimes a little bit interesting to come up with something that is new and exciting, because we don't like new and exciting, and we've made sure that we've accounted for all the usual things. A risk profile provides staff, external partners, and decision makers with a clear snapshot of key risks. And the idea is to help identify areas of efficiency and potential opportunities to reduce risk and sometimes also reduce costs. The idea there again is to support strategic priority setting, resource allocation, informed decision making, and improved results. Or simply put, is we want to make sure we spend our money on the things that will cause us a problem, a significant problem, so that we avoid those problems. And it can be developed formally or informally, is for the most part not an option for us because it's enshrined in the regulations, and so we have to do something. But like I already mentioned, a lot of these things are already enshrined in regulations. There are specific requirements, and so a risk profile per se, there are still areas where it can be looked at, but it's going to be less high level. Some of the resources that I use to prepare are the two ACs from Transport Canada. As already mentioned, this document from the Canada School of Public Service. And then after, as already mentioned, we'll be sending some those sample questions, and the deck will also be made available. And I believe Anthony is also recording this session, so people can look at it after the fact.
I do want to thank you, Ed, to having taken the time to work with us to prepare this presentation and offering it. From Roger, who says, who should participate in the annual review? You want to take that one, Ed?
Yeah, that's a great question. So most of the corporate flight departments are anywhere between 1 and 2 or 3, 4, 5 people maybe. The key people should be the operations manager, the chief pilot, and the maintenance manager. Those would be essential. And especially if it's smaller operations, you may want to do it all together or just share the information later on. But the annual SMS review should involve the ops manager and chief pilot, possibly the maintenance manager, And if you have an auditor or if you're doing the audit yourself, then that would also be included.
FAA recently extended the timeline 24, 36 months for 13591 operation required implementation of SMS in their org. Where does TC stand on this? Transport hasn't looked at any changes of that nature. I think Transport right now, based on my limited conversations with them on this issue, is obviously studying the FAA regulatory approach, but it is different, and so we'll see where that goes. And also mentioned at the beginning that Transport Canada is looking at SMS modernization. The first thing is moving a lot of the regulatory requirements that are in the various subparts, like 604, and moving it to part 1. That's phase 1. Phase 2 will be a fuller review of SMS, really aimed at those particular parts of the cars that don't have SMS. So I don't have any more information on this particular question, but we can certainly look into it. And if there's anything specific that we should share, we will. Another question here from Roger saying, are there any organizations offering refresher auditor courses? I think that the CCAA was offering training on that. I'm not too sure if they're still doing it. But Ed, do you know anybody new on this?
I believe you're right. The CCAA, Canadian Council for Aviation and Aerospace, I think that stands for, they do provide those courses. They just need to be organized. And in the past, when I initially took auditor training, that's who I took it through. And there are other courses as well, risk management, other things that could be looked at.
So what we can do is we could probably, for those that use the RMS, there is a link there about CCAA, but maybe as part of a regulatory affairs update, I could probably put a little article together saying that for those that are interested in training CCAA, and then we'll do some research to see who else, and then we could put some information on that. So that will follow in the future. Scott asked a question, says, for a more global risk view, the FSF has established an increasingly effective aviation safety network, dashboard system, and extensive slicing capabilities. Okay, that's more of a statement and question. So I haven't really looked at that myself. Maybe Ed?
I believe FSF stands for Flight Safety Foundation. I recently started following some of their information. I'm still wising up on that. But they have initial impressions are, as Scott says, looks very interesting.
Right. The one comment I can make is that Ed mentioned that when he does the annual trend report, we also look sometime at the NBAA data. What I found interesting in their latest report is that the trends that we've identified were, I would say, matched to between 95 and 100%. So it's not unique to us. It's pretty much international. So it just, I guess, goes to demonstrate that at least our approach to the data, however minimal it is available to us, we seem to be on the same track. So at least we can have some confidence in our level of detail. But we'll certainly look at the Flight Safety Foundation additionally and see how we can roll it in more. I think that as my own closing, although we may finish this call today, anyone on the call, if you think of anything, certainly reach out to me, and whatever question, if I don't have the answer, I'll discuss it with Ed, and if not, we'll look even further and get the answer. This is not a one-time conversation. As I mentioned, my personal goal is to make this a fully interactive approach so that we can't obviously head off issues before they arrive, but if we can start seeing trends like everything else, we can start thinking about how we don't want to avoid them in the future.
When I think of bringing it to a close, I want to thank each of you. You are taking the time out of your day to join us. You're champions on this topic. You're interested in this topic. And we want to grow not only the content that we're undertaking here, we want to make sure that our industry is aware of the great efforts, the great work that you all undertake on the daily to offer safe, reliable, and efficient transportation. So this is just one piece of that. And as Bob alluded to, it's the conversation today. It's the conversation we can have tomorrow. So on that point, we are going to have this video available. So it's something that you can share amongst your teams. If there's something that you find of interest, perhaps it's somebody in your flight department that maybe is thinking about taking on the safety manager role, or is just broadly interested in what actually happens behind the scenes, perhaps this video and some of the supplementary information will help to educate them and move them along. So we're going to follow up to each of the registered participants. So I think everybody that's here, because here you got the link and you're registered. So I will send to you from the CBAA the handout that Bob and Ed had created that lists a number of questions. We will package up the presentation so that it's available. And then next week, I'll probably edit out, but just kind of clip together just the raw content of this conversation. I'll upload it to our YouTube. I'll upload it to X, to LinkedIn. And again, you can use that video to share with the teams that you'd like to share this information with. So with that said, we wanted to be intentional and kind of not take the entire time. And so we'll return back a little bit of time to your calendar. Stay tuned. There will be a sessions 2 and 3. So we'll follow up both to the registered attendees. You here, we'll also have in our social media. You'll see more information about when those are coming up. But our intention is to kind of continue this conversation on this topic. So thanks for taking the time out of your day to join us. Again, thanks to Ed, thanks to Bob for facilitating this, and to each of you for joining. Appreciate you taking the time again. Have a great day, and we will chat again soon. Take care.